Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Life in the Fasting Lane podcast. This show is about keto, fasting, health, low carb, and honestly being open to ways to health and ways to better eating across the board, finding what's right for you. So I have a very special guest today and we're very exotic. We're coming to you live, well not live, we're coming to you from Mallorca, Spain, which honestly, I didn't even know where that was, but it's a fancy island close to Ibiza on the coast of Spain. And I'm here talking to the handsome and very nicely accented Darryl Edwards.
That's a very accurate description.
Did you like that?
Yes, you can obviously tell that I gave her that prior to us having a chat. So I wanted you to make me sound far better than I am. So thank you.
Yes. Well, as you can tell, Darryl has a lovely accent. And is that the only reason that I chose to interview him? No, he's smart too. You can tell by the glasses.
The glasses, yes.
Right?
Yes,
that's what gives it takes it like to the intelligence notch and just lets people know.
I need whatever I need to do to portray intelligence. That's what I do. Hence the glasses.
I like it a lot.
Yes, and the fake accent because I'm actually from New Jersey.
He is. So anyway, I met Darryl at Low Carb Universe, which is a fantastic event, which I was lucky enough to be a speaker at. And this means I get access to all the speakers. And Darryl is also a speaker at Low Carb Universe. So the way we're going to start is Darryl is going to tell you a little bit about where you can find him and who the heck he is and why he's speaking at Low Carb Universe. Darryl.
Yes.
Where can people find out about you and why are you speaking at Low Carb Universe? Because I'm not sure if you're a low carb person or not.
Okay, so I am the founder of Primal Play, and Primal Play or the Primal Play method, and that's a way of getting natural, instinctive, universal movement, physical activity, the joy of movement, and combining that with play to make it something that's engaging and exciting for humans to engage in. Because we certainly have a problem with a lack of physical activity, with people starting exercise programs and not wanting to continue, of people assuming that exercise has to be painful and punishing, and that's the only way you can progress with exercise. So I'm one of those people who doesn't really like exercise, but I do love movement. I do love dancing. There are things that I do love when it comes to movement. So I wanted to create a movement program that basically made people think, okay, there are things that I can do, that I can enjoy, that I don't need to be in a gym. I don't need to spend lots of money on equipment. The best equipment I own is right here. The best gym environment is wherever I am. And so that's the sort of philosophy in my approach for movement. In terms of why I'm here as a speaker, I'm addressing an audience of predominantly keto, low carb individuals, and I wanted to give them some hints and tips as to how they could use movement to optimize their low carb keto lifestyle. So if they're looking to prevent or to manage type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, or they're thinking about improving their cardiovascular health or prevention of chronic lifestyle disease, how can movement play a part in that? Can movement help with blood pressure? Can it help with insulin resistance? Can it help with preventing type 2 diabetes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Yes, yes, and yes. And if it can help, how does it help? And what can I do to make it help me? So that's pretty much what my talks have been about whilst I've been here.
So when I met Darryl, of course, I immediately stalked him right away. And I came across his TED Talk, which is Why Working Out Isn't Working Out. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the main focus of that talk?
Yeah, so that's, again, discussing the big idea. The big idea was if we have a physical inactivity epidemic, which we do, if existing solutions are failing, so on the one hand, we have more gyms, more workout programs, more workout magazines, more smartphone apps with exercise programs than ever before. So we've got more exercise options available than ever before in human history. But we also have the most sedentary lifestyles ever in human history. So we have this kind of dichotomy. So why aren't these systems and programs working Why are they not being taken up on a large scale? Why do people join gyms on January 1st, New Year's resolutions, and they either never attend or they're only there for a few weeks of the year, and they're just paying that monthly subscription? And the only persons that benefit are the ones that own the gym. Why is that? So I kind of discussed the reasons as to why humans find it really difficult to engage in exercise, and why we living in an environment which encourages us to be sedentary, and why we feel really comfortable being in a chair, and why this can sometimes feel like the best place to exist. And so because of that, what can we do to make it better? What can we do to make it easier for us to become more physically active? So I discussed some solutions, and part of that is changing the environment to make it easier for us to move, to make it about movement, not exercise. So if it's about exercise, then you're thinking, I've got to get the right outfit, I've got to look a particular way, I've got to make sure I go to the right gym, I'm doing the right program. It's much more about keeping up your appearances. Whereas actually I'm trying to say, no, the focus should be on your health, on longevity, on your mood, on your well-being, not just about aesthetics, not just about what your fitness performance is. So that pressure you can remove, and you can just think about what you want to do and what you enjoy. And I kind of try to package that up in 15 minutes and say, here are my ideas about the solution, what we can do as individuals, what we can do as families, what we can do as society to progress, to become happier with physical activity.
So in your talk, you're from the UK, and I think you shared a couple of really interesting statistics around the current state of things. So can you share that with our audience?
Yes, so 1/3, if you look at the official stats around physical activity participation, about 1/3 of US adults, it's pretty similar in the UK, are meeting the physical activity guidelines. So these come from the World Health Organization, the US Surgeon General, pretty much any health guideline will stipulate do a minimum of 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise, and do 2 days a week of resistance training, strength training. And that, aiming for that baseline, will give a significant difference in your overall health, mental and physical health. And so when people are asked by questionnaire, how much do you do? About 1/3 of adults meet the guidelines. But when people actually tell the truth, and by telling the truth, I mean wearing an accelerometer, that drops down to about only 5% of adults. So only 1 in 20 adults in the US meet the minimum recommendation for physical activity. And of course, we can make our own decisions. You don't always want to be told what to do. But more alarmingly for kids who probably should be doing far more physical activity, and they certainly should be as a recommendation than adults, kids aren't faring much better. So there are very scary stats such as you're 3 times as likely to be admitted to hospital, to ER, falling out of bed as a kid than falling out of a tree in comparison to a generation ago. 75% of UK children spend less time outdoors than prison inmates. So it's a pretty serious situation where we're almost valuing the health of our prison inmates than our children. We kind of mandate, we know if we keep our prisoners locked up, they actually suffer more mentally. There's increased rates of violence and bullying, and so we see this happening with our children. There's increase in depression and mood disorders and physical inactivity problems, but we don't place the same importance on, we need to mandate more recess time. We need to make sure there are mandatory times that our kids are being active and having fun amongst themselves. So there's a whole raft of problems that I only became aware of when I started working with children and started seeing some of the research coming out and comparing the difference between my childhood, where it was a very active one, not because I was a sports kid, not because I was a jock, but because I was walking to school. I was coming home and then playing outside for a few hours. I wasn't going home and watching TV all evening or playing video games all evening. I had a very active childhood, and all of my friends had a similar one. And I didn't live in the country, I lived in the city, and it was safe to go to parks and to play, So there was a culture of that's what kids do when they come home from school. Our parents didn't want to see us. Like, what are you doing in the house? Get outside. You come back when it's time for something to eat. You come back when the sun goes down. Don't get into trouble. Look after each other. That was pretty much the instruction I had on a daily basis from my mother.
Yeah.
Get outside, play.
And it was a pretty fun life.
And it was very fun. And there was no we didn't have any hang-ups about I don't ever remember my friends coming to me and knocking the door saying, "Hey, you coming out to play?" And I'd be like, "Oh, you know what, guys, I had such a rough day of playing yesterday. My muscles are my legs are so sore after running around all day, and do you know what I mean? I need a day of rest. You know what I mean? I need a rest day, or do you know what I mean? It was like, of course, of course I'm going to come out and play. What else am I going to do?
Yeah.
And unfortunately for children now, physical activity has become about sports. It has become about, let me drive you to the next bit of coaching that you can do. And so for some children, of course, they love that. It's like, oh, I want to be a gymnast.
Not for my kid. When you're not good at organized sports, it sucks.
It sucks, for sure.
The only thing she has liked is swimming and horseback riding. And it was tough to find those, right? Like, we tried everything. We tried basketball. It was not good. We tried volleyball, soccer. No, not good.
Not good. And the thing is, if you're not that talented, so I wasn't very talented. I was a geek, hence the glasses. I've worn it a long time, folks. So I became a computer programmer. That was my career for many years. And so I wasn't particularly physically gifted. But what's interesting was at home, I played all of those sports that I wouldn't have been able to play at school.
Yeah.
So pretty much there was nothing I would say no to when it was about at home with my friends, just messing around. And where it wasn't that serious. If you won, you won. If you won, the next day you were going to lose anyway. There was no, there were no trophies handed out. There were no medals. It really was about the participation.
Yeah.
And you'd make sure that everyone involved had fun. Do you know what I mean? Like, the emphasis was always on, are we having fun collectively? Yes. Okay, let's continue doing this. If we're not, somebody will say, let's play something else. That's boring.
Sure.
He doesn't know how to play. She doesn't know. You're too young. You're too old. And so what I think is the most important part of play for children isn't necessarily the physical activity part of, running around and burning calories. I think the most important part is when adults aren't around, kids make different decisions when it comes to play. So they will climb trees. They will resolve conflict themselves. They will explore the environment where they're probably not normally permitted to do so. Hey, should we go down that bank and, what? Do you reckon we can do this? You have discussions. You build social rapport and emotional intelligence. So you have all of these other attributes of developing that peer group community that doesn't come from somebody coaching as an adult saying, do this, do that, do the other. And I'm going to make sure everything is safe and controlled and regimented. And, you can only do that for 2 minutes. I'm going to take you off and put somebody else on, or,
Yeah.
So there's all of those benefits, those kind of soft benefits that come from active play that kids do, that element of risk. We played a game when I was a kid we called it knock, door, run. And so basically, somebody would go to somebody's front door, knock the door, and you'd run away. And, someone would open the door and they'd see some kids running off. And most times the adults would be like, yeah, whatever. But sometimes those adults would be like, you know what, I'm going to get my shoes on and I'm
throw them at you.
Yeah, and I'm going to chase you. And that adrenaline rush, you certainly didn't want to get caught because you'd get into a lot of trouble. You certainly didn't want your parents to find out.
Yeah.
But, that thrill-seeking aspect of play is something that was part of the fun experience as a kid.
Yeah.
And, you know, so yeah. So I think it's something that many children now are missing out on, that experience of being able to make their own decisions, of being able to explore their environment, and to feel confident, you know, and to feel sort of trust from adults, and to, you know, be communicating with kids of different age groups and maybe different demographics. And do you know what I mean?
I have an almost 13-year-old daughter, and I struggle a lot. I think I really did not do a great job when she was small. She would climb up on the playground, and I was always like, be careful, don't fall, don't, you know, and I think that I stunted her ability to play because I was so worried about her falling. Whereas my husband grew up in a completely different world where they just ran and played, and I did too.
Yes.
But she's an only child. I was overprotective, and I always wondered, you know, worried about it, and it really stifled it. And we live in such a world now where you're not allowed to just let your kid go out and play and meet up with friends, and it's a much safer place to have them stay inside and have a friend over and they're inside. And you know, I let my child go for walks with the dog and a radio, and my parents think that is being a really irresponsible parent. Like that I let her go in the neighborhood with a radio walking the dog. Whereas when I was a kid, I was definitely doing that by almost 13.
Yes.
And so I don't think the world has changed that much as far as what I've looked at as incidences of kidnapping or like really serious things. But I think our knowledge of those situations has changed.
Oh, yes.
We hear about it on social media. We hear about it on the news. And so it's front of mind. And so when I've looked into it, the numbers have actually reduced over the years. But our knowledge and our stories and the face of those stories have increased so much that the want to cuddle up your child and protect them and like really struggle to figure out when you let them make X decision. It's stunning their growth, and I see it.
Yes.
But I got to be honest, as a parent, I don't know what the hell to do. Like, it sounds great. Like, but she could not imagine. Like, she's learned to ride a bike because my husband, my second husband, taught her to ride a bike, and it was really tough for her. And he made her do it, and he. I don't remember what it was. I'm pretty sure it might have been food motivated, actually, which is probably not a great lesson, but, you know, he had her do it, and she did it.
Yes.
And it was tough, but, like, I can't imagine sending her out now the way you and I used to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know any kids. Other thing, too, we've tried to look for kids in the neighborhood. We found, like, one that we only seen once. Like, where are all those kids that were in our neighborhood that we played with? I don't understand it.
At the moment, they're inside.
I guess so.
Probably watching this podcast. No,
probably so. They're all about it, right?
Yeah. But you know, they're inside, usually on smart devices, and parents do feel, you know, helicopter parenting is now the norm, and it has literally happened pretty much within 1 to 2 generations where this has occurred, where my parents were like, get out of the house, do whatever you want, just don't get into any trouble. You know, and come back when we tell you to come back. Yeah. That was pretty much it. When I had children, I wanted to be that parent, but I would say I was almost. The advantage I had in terms of making sure my children had some of that is during the summer vacations, school vacations, my children would stay with my grandparents.
My mom,
so
my daughter does that a lot too.
Would do what happened to me as a kid.
But see, mine don't do that anymore. But, even though they used to, they don't, because they feel like the world has changed.
Because the world has changed.
Right?
That's how they feel. But you know another interesting stat?
Tell me.
You are more likely to be struck by lightning. And just think about all the people you know who've been struck by lightning. But you'd be more likely to be struck by lightning than to be abducted by a stranger.
I believe that. Right. I've looked at these statistics, and it's an unrealistic fear that we focus on all the time.
Yes.
And it's crazy. So you guys will notice that this fella is different from most of our guests. Most of our guests come on and we're talking about keto, we're talking about low carb, we're talking about fasting, which is the focus of this podcast. And so I want to ask Darryl a question. First of all, I think movement and exercise are important. But one thing I have discovered over the years is that exercise is not particularly, this is my opinion and what I've read, particularly effective for weight loss.
Yes.
I think exercise is great for mental health and breathing and building your body and balance and not falling and breaking a hip later. Like, I think it's great for all of these things, which improve the quality of your life. But I think so many people spend so much time exercising and then get disappointed and then lose a ton of weight from exercise. So 2 questions. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay.
And number 2, I find a lot of people who start to use intermittent fasting feel concerned about exercise when fasting. And it sounds like from your point of view with movement, it's always a good time for movement.
Yes.
So my feelings are whatever works best for you, whether you're fasted in a fasted state or a non-fasted state, if working out or playing works for you, you should do it.
Yeah, so I suppose to address the first point around, exercise is not effective for weight loss.
Okay.
Which that was probably one of the first questions that I wanted to investigate in a lot of depth and detail, because I would often hear this and I was always kind of like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. And there are many people who go to the gym and do lots of exercise who you don't see any difference at all in their body composition. So you kind of go, that kind of makes sense. And I think a lot of people have that experience. But, movement, physical activity, exercise, that it has a dose response. So actually, it's not a binary that exercise cannot help you to reduce weight, cannot improve your body composition, because if it didn't ever work, you wouldn't have a significant part of the sporting population, elite athletes, who seem very able to manage their body composition pretty much through exercise alone, eating diets that we certainly wouldn't subscribe to and don't have any issues at all with body composition.
But isn't that just because they're doing a ton
but yes,
of it?
yes,
Like,
exactly.
So
that's what I'm saying. It's not a case of exercise can't, which is what we tend to hear.
Yeah.
Right? People say, oh, exercise can't do anything. Nothing to do with weight loss. Right? Actually, there's a sliding scale. Yeah. So what we tend to do and where we tend to expect results from exercise in terms of managing weight isn't enough. And so we would have to do a lot more, and many of us just don't have the time or the inclination to want to do that.
Yeah, it seems not worth it.
It's not worth it. So the best thing to do, of course, is the combination of diet and exercise. So if you look at the literature tells us that the best way to manage and maintain your successful weight loss trajectory, regardless of your diet, tends to be in conjunction with exercise. So if you're building more lean muscle mass, you do have an increase in your metabolism, your basal metabolic rate. And so that is part of what better helps you able to, burning. I mean, again, I'm going to mention calories, but you do burn more calories at rest when you have more lean muscle mass. And so one of the best ways to build lean muscle mass is not through dieting, actually, but it's through physical activity. So yes, lose body fat, use fasting, use a ketogenic or low carb or paleo diet to help with that, to assist with that. And that's the best way for the majority of people to do. But if you want to improve the ability to maintain the results you've gained, and you don't want to be having that yo-yo where you go, I've got to be even more strict now because I've plateaued, then physical activity is certainly a really good buffer. But let's put, so another observation would be Dancing with the Stars, Dancing on Ice. All of those participants, they seem to drop weight like it's, every week. Oh, I lost 5 pounds, lost 10 pounds.
They're dancing all the damn time.
Exactly.
Like it's their full-time gig at a time.
So they don't change their diet.
Right.
They're probably eating more.
Yeah.
But because they're doing 6 to 8 hours a day of dancing, so again, that would be my counter argument to that exercise doesn't work. In terms of the health benefits, which I think was the other second question.
Yeah, about fasting, about exercise with fasting.
Timing.
So I had a trainer who I'd worked with for years. I had a lot of respect for. And then when I started doing intermittent fasting, she was like, I'm not going to train you if you work out when you're fasted. And I, since then, have worked with other trainers who believe differently. I've read a lot about it. I've researched a lot about it. And I can tell you for a fact, me personally, when I work out in a fasted state, I perform much better.
Yes.
And I'm not doing complicated things. I'm lifting weights, I'm doing squats, whatever. I always feel much better in a fasted state. I don't even ever want to work out again in a feasted state. It feels sluggish. It feels more difficult.
Yes. So I mean, again, I try to always use the evidence base in research. So research does support exercise in a fasted state where you're already going to be glycogen depleted, you're going to be, more likely to be using fat as fuel. You're more likely to have a better metabolic effect. So I would say somebody who is looking to improve their body composition, who is looking to reduce body fat percentage, definitely in terms of timing, in a fasted state, early in the morning, importantly, where you do have a fairly high cortisol level in the early morning, where you're very alert, you're very focused. That's a time to do that type of activity where, okay, I'm going to really push myself. That's a great time to exercise. In terms of being feasted in exercise, you want 2 or 3 hours at a minimum in between your last meal and when you exercise. The reason being is, in that 1 to 3 hours after eating, the priority is digestion. The priority is for your body to get as many nutrients as possible, not to be thinking about getting your muscles primed for performance and your heart and lungs primed for performance. So I would say, if I had to have a preference for exercising, whether it's fasted or feasted, I would definitely do fasted. And if I'm going to be doing it after eating, I would wait at least 2 or 3 hours before exercising.
So you and I met at dinner the first night at this event, and we got into this super intense conversation.
Yes.
Which was very interesting. And I feel like you're an interesting mix of how you look at the world. I feel like you think that there is a very big problem with the lack of physical activity in the general population, and you wish to change it.
Yes.
I feel like there's a very big problem with also physical activity, but my focus is on fasting and low carb lifestyle, and I wish to change it. And so the way I'm trying to go about that is to have a podcast, to write on a blog, to write a book, to tell a story, to interview smart people that I can learn their opinions from, and to help people find their way. And I think you've been doing the same thing, but you've been on this journey for a while now, I think since 2013 or earlier.
Yeah, well, my personal journey, 2003.
Okay.
My business journey, 2011.
First book was
2013.
2013,
so, yes,
and then you started before that in 2011. You've had a few books. Tell them the names of your books.
So my first published book was Paleo Fitness. I then wrote a book in 2016, Paleo from A to Z, which is more of a lifestyle book. And my latest book, my last book, was called Animal Moves, which talks about how we should be moving more like the animals we are, and by training like animals, we'll become more human. So that's the kind of philosophy behind that.
That came out in 2018.
That was 2018,
And people can find these on Amazon by Darryl Edwards.
You can find them in any good or bad bookstore, basically. So
I love that.
Yes.
All right, so you go on this journey, and you tell me the story that sounds pretty overwhelmingly bad about where the world is with physical fitness.
Yeah.
You're helping people individually, but now you have a greater cause to change policies to affect this, because you don't think it's going to be resolved just off of the individual. And I guess my question to you is, how can you think this problem is so big and at the same time actually believe that you can change it?
So one of the problems I feel with anyone delivering this message of, hey, you know what, by doing these fairly simple steps, you can radically change your life, and you're going to now have a lifetime of glorious health and well-being. The downside is, it is really simple for a certain type of individual who doesn't need much motivation apart from the source of information that comes in. They review it and they go, oh, wow, I think that's going to work for me. That hasn't worked. This looks like it's going to work. I'm going to do it. Oh, wow, I've had this experience. It's working for me. I'm going to keep doing this. I feel that sort of individual is the barest of minimums of individuals who embark upon lifestyle change in a big way. The majority of people really struggle long term. They can maintain very short attachments to particular lifestyle change, and they tend to have, instead of flatlining, they tend to kind of peak and troughs, doing really well, not so well, doing really well, oh, I've just seen some other information, I'm going to go this way, get distracted, I feel awful for not doing this. That tends to be human nature. And so as I thought about the challenges of physical inactivity and why we're more sedentary, I then realized that humans prize convenience over and above pretty much anything else, actually, from a physical activity point of view. So
now,
you can't...
Go ahead. We'll edit it. It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So because we prize convenience, if you leave it just to the individual to make the decisions around become more active, get more activity into your life, but you surround that individual with chairs and a car to commute to work, and in an office environment where you're sitting all day, and then you commute back to work sitting, and then you're at home and you're thinking, I'm tired, and you sit, then that's what you will choose to do. That's what your environment is priming you to do. So as well as trying to convince that individual that this change is good for your health, which we kind of know, hey, physical activity is good for your health. Yes, yes, yes. All this information, blogs, podcasts, it's everywhere. Everyone is shouting this message. Why aren't people taking this up? And it's because it's not being backed up by let's also change the environment to make it a bit easier to facilitate this change. And in our discussion the other night, I mentioned smoking cessation. And so there were years and years of the first stage was let's get the education out there. Now that we know smoking is harmful for our health, let's have education. Let's tell people in school, have television advertisements and programs, and then people start becoming knowledgeable. Oh, there aren't many people who aren't smoking. Smoking's on the increase that we don't understand. Oh, I know what we need to do. Let's put warnings on cigarette packets. Smoking kills, smoking causes lung cancer. That's going to do the trick. Oh, hasn't really made much of a difference. I know what we'll do next. Huge taxation. It's going to be so expensive to buy cigarettes. Who's going to buy them? People seem to be getting the money from somewhere because they're buying, And it was only when public policy changed around what we're going to do to stop this. It isn't just about information and education. It becomes about enforcement. So let's make it impossible to smoke at work. It's now against the law. Let's make it impossible to, be smoking in a hospital bed and at schools and in public places and in parks and so now, smoking rates have dropped significantly since those type of changes have come in. And so I feel from a food landscape as well as a physical activity landscape, we need something in that direction. And I don't mean kind of Big Brother or where people that we're concerned about controlling our environment who aren't going to be thinking about us as humans and make the right decisions, right? You know what I mean? I'm talking about where society makes a decision in a way that no one disputes. So in terms of smoking, there's very few people who would argue that it was wrong to ban smoking in public spaces. Even smokers are kind of like, yeah, I would prefer it if I could smoke in the local park, but I kind of understand that the majority of people want to be healthy and that why should young kids be impacted by this? And I think we kind of need to do something similar for movement and for food. The movement one, I think, is a little bit easier than the food because, of course, there's so many opinions. You've got big food, you've got big pharma, you've got people who are getting backhanders, lobbyists, With movement, I think it's easier because you can have town planners and urban planners and you can create cycle pathways for people who do want to actively commute. And you could probably say, let's have a no car to work day and make that, as enforceable in the law. And so those things are starting to happen.
I went to some country that actually had that one day. I don't remember if it was Iceland, but it was like one day a week there was no cars, and I've never heard of such a thing. Okay. Darryl, thank you so much. Will you tell people one more time where they can find you on social media, what your website is, so they can check you out?
Yes, so I'm Darryl Edwards. I'm known as the Fitness Explorer. So at Fitness Explorer on Instagram, on Twitter. My blog is primalplay.com, so you can find out some examples. Actually, is what's this play out stuff? What are you talking about? You can see some videos. You can see lots of content there. Lots of the research that I mentioned. So if you're interested in the evidence base, you can find that out. And please connect with me on social media and let me know how you felt about this discussion. And thank you very much for your time, Eve. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Darryl. Well, Darryl has brought all his smarts and his accent. Thanks so much for joining us on Life in the Fasting Lane. Check us out on Instagram and Twitter at Fasting Lane. And until next time, to your health and hotness.